So now this session is being recorded. So let me say a good morning to all of you. It's really my pleasure to be able to welcome you all to, well, at least virtually, to Monash University, Malaysia. My name is Adnan Trakic, and I'm head of Business Law and Taxation Department. We have a small law department under the School of Business with 8 academics, mostly in areas of commercial law, employment law, cyber law, contract law. So before we proceed with the topic, I know that many of the participants are aware who Philip Koh is, our speaker for today, but just for perhaps some of our students and colleagues who may not know Philip well, let me say a few words about Philip. Though I know Philip is, will probably, he prefers a short introduction, and he did tell me to not make a long introduction, please. But so Philip Koh is an advocate and solicitor of the High Court of Malaya and a senior partner of Mahkamari and Philip Koh. We are very proud to say that Philip is also an adjunct professor at Monash University, Malaysia, School of Business. He teaches law and literature at University Malaya, where he also holds an adjunct professorship. So his career crosses 3 worlds, which is really unique: academia, legal, as well as business. So he was executive director of the Phileo Group, thereby providing a personal witness to its rise and demise. He has been involved in corporate law reform, leading to the passage of the Companies Act 2016. And I know that he's also currently working very hard on having Contracts Act 1950 as well, do certain reforms in that field. The speaker is also recognized as a leading corporate governance practitioner and commercial law arbitrator. He authored prominent contract law and public law texts. He writes regularly in financial media and comments on public law crises. So I'm also aware that we have quite a number of colleagues who were in the Phileo Group, who worked in the Phileo Group management together with Philip when Philip was there. So I think today's topic will really offer a unique perspective. We will be able to have comments and perhaps questions and different perspectives from other colleagues as well. So I'm truly honored to welcome you all to this session today. And without taking any more time, Philip, I pass on the floor to you. So perhaps you may share yours. I believe you have slides, so you can share the screen and the slides.
Dr. Adnan, thank you so much for your kindest introduction. And my acquaintance with the Monash University Group consists of hearing Dr. Majid and a few people sharing things too. That was years ago. It's a pleasure and privilege to be invited as one of your adjunct staff. One of my good colleagues, Chi Kyung, did ask and say, are you collecting adjunct professorship like collecting some stamps or datukship? Well, I have no datukship yet. I have an original datukship. My grandson was born about 8 months ago. That was something that worth cherishing. But thank you so much. This opportunity is something
Philip, I'm so sorry for interrupting. If I just may tell everyone else, if they have any questions as you progress with your talk, perhaps they can write the questions in the chat section, or alternatively at the end, after the talk, they can raise the digital hand in the Zoom function, and I will be happy to let them ask questions directly to you, Philip. I'm so sorry for the interruption, Philip.
No, not at all, not at all. I welcome interruptions in the sense that I hope that you all did a bit of a quick review of the digital book on the Phileo story. I would like this session to be a robust conversation, but I will do an introductory 20 minutes, I hope, sharing. And I will share screen with PowerPoints because Dr. Adnan says they like PowerPoints, at least they are undergraduate students. I remember during my acquaintance in the financial sector, I happen to have a privilege of chairing a forum in the central bank. A great governor of Texas, I think, Federal Reserve Bank. They have an individual reserve bank in the North American continent. I love his opening line. He says that I have no PowerPoints because it's often power without points and points without power. So I can't fulfill that remit because I thought I could do without PowerPoints. But the more funnier one was, it's a Texas bull, because the first point people will look at and the last point in between is all bull, okay? So if today is all bull, please pardon me, and I would crave indulgence for forgiveness for wasting your 1 hour. But let me just say that today I speak, although, as Dr. Adnan put it, a person who was involved in the formation of the Phileo group, both as an external counsel while in that law firm where Chee Kiong now is, and I was privileged to be invited to help in the formation of the group. So I knew its genesis. And then later, lured by the sense that I can retire from this job called advocate and solicitor, I joined them as executive director and thought that I could retire happily ever after. But life does not deal you such cards, all right? And the cards and the deck became reshuffled. But today I shall talk about that in a while, in a sense that the perspective will be one that is invested in the group. And so I have a certain bias, if we may actually have to say that. In fact, someone said to me very caustically when they saw this proposed seminar, saying that, Philip, will you be giving an apologia for someone who is just a benefactor of political elite? All right. I shall have to engage that question somewhere along today's seminar, hopefully in a measured way so that Dr. Adnan would not get into trouble. But what is our discussion in a university seminar if we can't address this in a measured, objective manner? All right. Not in any polemical or personal polemics. Let me now share screen, because otherwise I might lose all of you and I might lose my thoughts in wandering around. I have entitled my PowerPoint as the rise and demise of a financial group in the roaring 90s, the Phileo saga. So what we have is, in the beginnings, all right, many of us who lived through that period would recollect that in the late 80s and 90s, driven by a high voltage Prime Minister, Dr. Sri Mahathir, whose desire is to leapfrog Malaysia from an essentially, at least for his commitment to the majority group of our country, essentially the agrarian, semi-urban, and emerging corporate world and capital market, to leapfrog Malaysia and that group of majority Malaysians, all right, into 20th century, late 20th century, and to take part in that tremendous growth. This growth is seen by the drive for GDP, all right, driving it up to even 9%, creating stress and strain throughout the whole macro economy. I'm no macroeconomist, but looking back at that period, part of the rise and the subsequent threat to Phileo came from macro structural development, although the more specific causation for it being taken up in a large merger with large banks was, of course, a more specific issue, which I shall touch upon very briefly. The beginnings of Phileo. The word Phileo is an interesting word. The co-founder, Mr. Rudy Ko Eng Wah, I believe, gave the name to the founder, entrepreneur, energetic Tong Both of them hail from a small, from a town, a port called Port Klang, and they were Sunday school mates together. So the word phileo came from the Greek word meaning philia. As we are aware, Philadelphia means city of the brotherly love. So phileo became a word which was taken up as a name for the emergent group. But the group began in its first instance by a stockbroking company, and it was Phileo Securities. A stockbroking firm was available in Ipoh. In fact, I met the old founder of it, an elderly gentleman in Ipoh, quite interesting man. And he sold that broking firm to the founders, particularly Tong, who, returning back from Canada, Simon Fraser studies after doing his master's in economics and accounting theory, which is an interesting combination in those days. Many of us just study to become a professional accountants, but an economics separately. But a combination of that exposed this young man then to a discipline that fascinated him. A little anecdotal, because I know him well enough. He said that traveling with groups of people who discuss stock market and the New York Stock Exchange as if it is a breakfast conversation enlightened him with the intricacies of share trading. But deeper into it, he actually co-wrote a paper with his professor in a New York Financial Economics journal, which is a very respected journal in this field. So when Mr. Tong returned to Malaysia, in a sense, I'm giving a narrative of the beginnings of Phileo, he searched for a industry which he would like to put his commitment to, and landed up in Arab Malaysian group as a share analyst, and then Morgan Grenfell, and subsequently, of course, founded Phileo Securities, combining it with a very interesting stockbroking firm then known as Peregrine Securities, which was led by a dynamic Philip Tosse, T-O-S-E. By the time it was divested and sold to Maybank, it had grown into a respected integrated financial service provider. Mr. Tong, in his Phileo story, is quoted to have said this: "When I started my career in the broking industry, I could not understand why Western firms dominated and were often free to exert their influence, whether it was through their opinions and the stock market or simply getting business from large fund managers. Why were local Malaysians accepting defeat so easily?" So the beginning of a dynamic group was this commitment that Malaysians can do better, all right? Malaysians, regardless of creed, color, race, or religion, can contribute to the well-being of our country and of this beloved nation we are in. The Phileo's vision and mission, when finally it became an integrated group, when the Phileo was able to pick up a license, which was from the UOB group, all right? They had an additional license in North Borneo or Sabah, and that was available for it to be brought into the group to make it an integrated financial house. Our vision, according to Tong again, was to establish a financial services owned and run by Malaysians, capable of competing with the best. We were to achieve this by means of a highly motivated workforce, driven by a single dream, by being the most innovative, by challenging norms and conventions in order to discover better and more efficient ways of doing things, and by embracing technology and systems. I find this statement a concise summing up of the philosophy of the entrepreneurial spirit, what, of course, Robert Schiller calls the animal spirit, right? Or John Maynard Keynes, for that matter, if you go back. In a sense, in a capitalist, late capitalist market society, the entrepreneurial energies known as animal spirits drive the growth of organizations and firms. And there was the timing where this young man returning back from Canada who grown up in a humble background of being a son of a car repair shop, all right, decided to push forward this vision. And the word innovative, challenging norms and conventions, which I shall unpack in a short while, and embracing technology and system. This is a person which is not contented in just instructing external consultants to understand systems. This is a person who takes time to fly to MIT, to Bloomberg, all right, to see the latest in technology at that time. Remember, this was almost 30 years ago, all right, where even a fax machine in an office seems to be an innovation. And the beginnings of a mobile technology and the laptop was there. But the financial services and capital market have yet to harness this. We are now so used to digital banking or e-commerce of various sorts. But in those days, like it or not, Phileo was a pioneer. I just now recognize Mr. Kong and his team. They came from, if I remember, the Hewlett-Packard Group, all right? And they were hired to be in-house to develop these platforms. It was not merely, as I can narrate a story without naming the group, in some of the banking groups, when they saw this young upstart group running ahead, they decided to also employ external consultants to create IT platform to challenge Phileo. But it's not the same. If the executive owner or substantial controlling shareholder merely delegated or hire external consultants, and I'm not here to insult consultants, which sometimes they con you with a project and they insult you with a fee bill. I wish I could do that, but I don't get that very much, although I hope to get that, so I'm speaking out of envy. So here is a group that decided to hire people from the industry and develop it in-house while driven by an immediacy of the owner being in touch with the technology, because that person goes to the top technological providers in the North American continent to see the development there and to see the Charles Schwab of those times. I'm not even sure Charles Schwab is still existing, all right? This share dealing thing. So we must remember also that the then Kuala Lumpur Stock Exchange, which is now the Bursa Malaysia, I would describe, and without discourtesy to anybody, as a cozy club of oligopoly of brokers who control the capital market, commissions, and the channel of distribution. All right. If we are lawyers, and some of us are lawyers in this group, if you do a data search, the first case that land up in the court, then people are not so litigious then. It's a case called Tunku Nun. All right. And the chairman of the KLSC that it is just an unincorporated association. It is not part of a Capital Market Services Act, where the framing of regulatory and legal norms are done through a parent act. It is a cozy club of, I use the word oligopoly of brokers who control the capital markets. The other aspect worth looking at structurally is that securities law then was premised, all right, on the dealings of oops, how do I go back? Huh? I can't seem to. Okay. Securities law premises on the dealings of securities that envisages physical branch and location. All right. Nobody could imagine that you can deal with IT space and virtual space. So they envisages physical office and location. And in fact, the laws then, the Securities Industry Act, which I picked up in my old library, all right, 1983, all right, and prior to 83, the securities law, as I say, posits a physical branch. It also controls the market by license. So unless you have a dealer's license to deal with shares, you can be hauled up and penalized by fines or even a prosecution if you are a dealer in share and you are not a licensed dealer. It's interesting, huh? So for example, in my memory, the old Ban Hinley Bank, all right, I could imagine the rich Thai of those days where they have deposits in the bank account. They will go to the bank officer and say, you know, my interest is so low here, you know, how come? What can I do something with my money? All right. And the bank officer will say, Madam, why don't you buy some shares? And of course, the officer then crossed the line and became a dealer in shares for the high premium Thai who put money in the bank and wondering why he's only getting 2.5%. So they were hauled up by the regulatory authorities and say, you're a bank and you can't deal with shares, all right? So you had that structure where industry grew up through in the laws that regulate industry grew up in silos, I use the word, where banking is controlled by banking laws and capital market by securities industry law, and thereby creating silos and regulators. We have a fragmented, very territorial regulatory framework, even right now, to some extent, all right? Unlike Singapore, for example, MAS, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, you report to one person, the Minister of Finance, the Prime Minister, all right, if he happens to hold a post, and he decides whether or not Singapore Stock Exchange jump, and the chairman will say, which floor, sir, all right? Or he decides which bank should come and make sure that to pay obeisance to him, or to not report on some sensitive matters like 1MDB, okay? Sorry, I'm being controversial here, all right? But because Malaysia is delightfully fragmented, we actually have a plurality of regulators where I actually use a word, a capable player like Phileo could use, I'm using the word in a broad sense, arbitrage between the regulators. You arbitrage the rules, right? You see that there's one set of rules there. Okay, now why don't I park my banking, my share dealing, not with the securities house, which I set up with Peregrine at one time, and although that is a different story, Peregrine had to go away because Philip Toast was eager to be part of a banking group, knowing that he was so arrogant in Hong Kong when the Southeast Asia crisis came. He went to the bankers and they showed him the door, all right? He wanted to have a bank, but of course, he was not permitted to hold shares in a holding company that has a bank, because bank industry is a very sensitive national issue for all jurisdiction. But that's a separate story. So when Phileo arbitrage on the silos and parked the share dealing under the bank, procuring permission from the Central Bank of Malaysia, called BNM, Bank Negara Malaysia, we have an exempt dealer status. I'm using the we in the past, all right? I was part of it after thinking that I could retire from legal profession like Dato Francis Tan. Unfortunately, I had to keep on working. Then I went and joined them as an executive director, and I saw how the whole process began to take place. I used the word disruption, all right? This is a modern word, of course. When technology comes, it is disruptive. But disruption also causes, well, I like this sort of alliteration, dissent and detractors, all right? You have former players who say, why is this upstart coming in to destroy our nice cake that we have been consuming for many, many years, all right? Every share dealing, the broker and the firm gets a 1% commission. Now, if you have a high share trading, that's a lot of money, all right? And you have high rollers, we use the word rollers because it's a casino analogy, all right? People who buy in huge blocks of share, a 1% broking fee is large. And of course, the players then is quite interesting. They put a rule to say no rebate. No matter if you punt a 2 million share, all right, and you have to pay 1% out of commission on that, there's no rebate, all right? that no rebate rule became fairly enriching to the share broking firm. But we are aware, we means again the past we, that the broking firms actually rebated high rollers. They do a deal outside Malaysia through Hong Kong, all right? And from there, a rebate is given outside the jurisdiction. What happens when the Phileo group came into being, all right? It is interesting. I wouldn't name the player. One of the old players met with Tong and say, Phileo is a new kid in the block. Why don't Phileo join the club? There will still be a window to make lots of money before Charles Schwab comes along, all right? And before the nasty Matsalis, sorry, I'm not anti-West, I'm just using it as a colloquial comment, come along and eat up our lunch. Actually, that phrase was used when I traveled with Datuk Seri, now Tan Sri Nazir Razak. We went together to see whether we can set up mess deck, but that is another separate story. And one of the brokers we met, you know, these New York people are really arrogant people. They turn around to us and say, we'll come and eat up your lunch if you don't innovate, all right, or buck up, which is true. So what we have is the contestation with existing market players resulted in the Kuala Lumpur Stock Exchange a threat to cut the stock feed, the information, the vital information that is the lifeblood for share trading. When the group Phileo created a platform known as PAL Direct, all right, and PAL World, that platform that disintermediated, another clumsy word, another D, but the mediators, which is physical brokers and remisiers, were disrupted and disintermediated. Remember, and this is now common parlance, technology converges. Technology does not respect how an industry is grown up. When it converges, it disintermediates old players with their old ways of doing channels of distribution, all right? With that convergence, the parking of the share trading engine in the bank became a threat to the existing players. And when the KLSC issued out a directive for the Phileo Bank to cease and desist the share trading, of course, by then, Phileo has gotten an exempt dealer status under the schedule of the then securities law, and therefore, the Phileo group could ignore the directive and threw it into the waste paper basket as a matter of figure of speech, all right? That irated the players, and they threatened to cut the stock feed, which would mean that share trading and information made available to the customers of Phileo Bank would not be available anymore. That gave rise to a filing of a judicial review action by our then Mr. Tommy Thomas, of course, who later became the Attorney General. He was my former partner in my then law firm, and there was an action filed, unprecedented in those times. Unlike now, many market players are quite happy to file judicial review, injunctions, all right, against regulators. In those days, it's unheard of that a regulator would ever dare to point a finger to the regulators, because they'll say that is a life too short or not, right? That's a literal paraphrase of a Cantonese phrase, which I shall not try to utter, all right? Because regulators are sensitive people, right? They don't know, they don't accept that judicial review means you are just declaring the law and clarifying. No. You can't be putting up a threat. In fact, recently I have an experience, I can't go into details, where this was raised even with a Pakatan government. And suddenly the Pakatan government, who used to the political people, quite happy to file judicial review, say, oh no, you can't do that, Mr. Philip Koh. I say, well, when you were in opposition, you were quite happy filing judicial review. And now that you are in the power, you say that you can't do that. Alas, power becomes pretty interesting when you are there and you don't want it to be challenged or clarified, all right? This is part of my journey in life when I look at philosophically these issues. One of the challenges of being a successful player, all right, there's a metaphor. The late Ani Arop, one of the great GLC's chairman, said there is a traditional kind of proverb, you know, it's like a Malaysian crab mentality. When a good crab climbs up a hole, the rest of the crab below the floor will pull the crab down and start beating him up, all right? This is part of the, I don't think it's an Asian thing. It is actually everywhere, all right? A rivalry, envy, all right? What in literature we call a kind of a mimetic rivalry, right? Which, well, as a side, Zuckerberg understood it, right? How everyone want to preen about their success while the rest of us are filled with envy and jealousy. So when a perceived patron falls, all right, the accusation that the party friendly to that patron should also suffer. I'm putting it in a very measured way. If I want to be measured, someone will say, well, a crony will have to go when the political patron is destroyed, all right? I don't quite like such words, all right? We're all friends of everybody. A filio is a friend. We are filia with everyone. When I'm teaching literature to my law class, all right, the Greek tragedy, you know, Antigone say, I love my brother, it's philia. And then Creon, the king, says, I love Thebes, the city. How dare you challenge me, all right? So it's a clash of a friendship in a way, all right? Friendships are there, network relationships are there. And clearly, and here, someone will say that I'm trying to give a kind of defense and apologia. You cannot get a banking license if you're not friendly to the political elite, all right? The Minister of Finance controls the consent to be given. So friendliness per se, I do not think should be a criteria to merely criticize. It is whether it goes beyond that to cross the boundary of legal regulatory propriety. So when the macro economy deteriorates and the debt crisis brought down, all right, Southeast Asia economy, in those days, I still remember reading Asian Wall Street Journal, the Tom Yum crisis, all right, the devaluation of the Thai baht, creating a crescendo of a domino effect, all right, through the Southeast Asian economy. Indonesia followed suit, and so did Malaysia. And when the economy shakes, the political elite landscape also shakes. And when that happens, all right, perceived prodigies or benefactors of linkages to a deposed elite or a change of regime, if we may use the word, all right, evokes me a phrase that comes from my teaching of literature again. I'm sorry, I'm crossing the boundary, where Balzac says, the sun has also set, all right, on the particular sector. So we have this problem, all right, in Malaysia, not only for Phileo. An older player, I shall not name, now residing in Hong Kong, said to one of my friends who was once visiting this older player, sir, why did you take most of your assets out of Malaysia? He says, well, it's like that. When you start playing football, the goalpost can change. And after that, if you are winning and scoring the winning goals, even with the goalpost that has changed, they then shift the side and say, no, you're now playing the other side, all right? And so this role shifting and has created, I believe, a sense of dismay, a sense of why a thriving group, and here I'm reminded, the demise of Phileo was not linked directly to the debt crisis. The debt crisis is a very important area for macro understanding of what went on in the late 90s when we have a triple issue of devaluation, bank crisis, all right, and credit crunch. The Phileo group made money and profit, and these figures are there, and they are audited figures. In an interesting Singapore report during the time where the Age was reporting on the 1MDB crisis, and the then government decided to haul up the editors and the owner and threaten them with a seditious charge, not on 1MDB, but tangentially on something else. But that was the excuse, as it were. Interesting editor of the Singapore Straits Times made this observation in an article cited in Straits Times 2nd April 2015. You can Google that and it's available on the net. The writer says, in Malaysia, the cozy nexus between businessmen and politicians is often a boon. In Mr. Tong's case, it became a bane. Okay, I like this, a boon and bane, all right? Following the 1998 crisis, Tong was forced to sell Phileo Allied, forced to sell. The country's biggest lender, Maybank. Some 50 commercial banks and financial houses were merged into 10 mega banks on the idea of consolidation, on the idea that large, big is better, not small can be beautiful, all right? So these issues are interesting for all Malaysians, I think, and all jurisdictions, for finance economists and for financial sector analysts. Is it true? And then Tong himself, of course, laments with that. In the name of consolidation of banking sector, and I misspelled that, and not A-N-D, A-N, innovatively, technologically superior and profitable bank was forced to be sold. A fascinating window. I remember the then very dynamic country manager, Sunil, who since passed away, this very dynamic South Asians who run top American banks. He was quoted in the local press. They watched Phileo because Phileo understood technology and applied it to all their processes. And that is something that is resonate with me. In my journey with the Phileo group, I have seen how dynamism coupled with commitment of teamwork, a name perhaps in those publications, but nonetheless, we are aware of each of their contribution. Navigating complex rules and laws and the technological platform that was completely innovative, even globally, if not only in this part of the world. Now it is common parlance for us to do digital e-commerce. Then it was a dream that was made short shrift of because of regime change and political upheavals. Beyond that story, we have other anecdotal links to what happened within the Phileo group, which I could take when questions can be raised or challenges made about my narrative. In no way do I say that Phileo is completely flawless or without fault as an organization. There are stress and strains as in any organization that tries to push us a boundary. There are people who were removed because they can't keep up with those changes, because the style of management is quite hands-on, fairly robustly based. And yet the collegiality and the commitment of so many people that I've seen in the group, whose dreams is to create a pioneering innovative group, was brought to an end due to political upheavals, which is an unfortunate aspect of Malaysia's polity. As in the closing words in the Phileo story, Mr. Tong did say, if this is the way Malaysia does business, how are Malaysians going to be competitive? I remember thinking about that even in other fields, with film production, all right, where we know that talented Malaysians have won prizes in world-class film festivals, but they're not classified as Malaysian films to enjoy tax exempt, merely because they don't satisfy certain criteria. How then can we be competitive? And why, if someone is competitive, do you take it away? All right. These are questions that haunts me as a Malaysian who love this country, and for all of us who want to contribute to institutional renewal and competitiveness for Malaysia. We have 20 minutes and maybe beyond a few more minutes. Dr. Adnan, over to you to moderate. I'm happy to take questions, brickbats, and all.
Thank you so much, Philip, for a wonderful presentation, and also for keeping with the time. So we have more time now to actually perhaps converse, and get some questions as well. If anyone has any questions, you can raise your digital hand if you would like to ask question directly to Philip, or you can write your question in the chat section of the Zoom. So while we wait for some perhaps questions, we have some comments, Philip, written earlier on by Alexander Loth. When you spoke about the silo approach, he commented that the silo approach was not unique to Malaysia. At the period of the time you speak of, Singapore too followed the siloed approach. Would you like to comment on that, Phil?
Well, can I invite Professor Alexander to give us a bit of a buying a barley sale? That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Alex, can you say something? It'll be great to know.
I don't have much to say about it, except that I happened to be following the news at that point in time. Mm-hmm. So I think what this falls into is that the Asian financial crisis caused a lot of distress, and bank consolidation, shall we say, was the order of the day. And so smaller outfits that were profitable, like Bank Bali, and also, in your case, the Phileo group, were then made to merge with larger entities in order to have the financial muscle to withstand the storm. Which then leads me to, maybe I have a question here, which is, would you say that Phileo is actually a victim of the times, which is the Asian financial crisis, rather than of particular political situations within Malaysia? Seeing that this was actually a pretty big storm which had come into Asia, and the response that was taken had, shall we say, had similar overtones with what you see in other places like in Thailand as well as in Indonesia, in the case of Bank Bali.
I think it's a valid point. I mean, I think in any event of such, there is multiple causation factors, all right? Why a group is being taken out. I think that there is also the very proximate causation factor, if I use the word causation in the legal sense, of the perceived close link that the founder had with the then Minister of Finance, when the Minister of Finance was deposed because of perceived challenge to the incumbent Prime Minister. Even the so-called the benefactor. But actually there was a friend who made a comment. The then Minister of Finance actually also needed a player that understood financial markets to be part of the sense that he's not just Mr. Renaissance man talking about philosophy and, there is someone who understood the financial sector. I mean, I'm not again trying to be an apologist for the founder, but I take your point, Alexander. That's I do agree. Structurally, it gave a kind of excuse. I mean, you would go back further in the 80s, the cooperative crisis, right? In Malaysia, the co-op crisis, the loan, our equivalent loan and savings issues. Again, if I may make a point, and I'm not trying to be polemical here, it was an alternate financial banking system for a group of businessmen who didn't have access to the banking system, right? But then when there was some deposit taking misdemeanors in some of the cooperative, the whole of the cooperative groups were being taken up and taken away, all right? My retrospective look at it, it was also a attempt to control the fact that you could have alternate sources of credit and security other than the dominant banking group. So unfortunately, in Malaysia and maybe even in Indonesia, for your Bank Bali analogy, all right, many of the businessmen fortune, because they are yoked to political elites. When the political elite change, there is that destruction. And your word, they became a victim too, notwithstanding that perhaps that was a performing entity, and it should be allowed to flourish. I think if you look closer, even in the Anglo-American history of growth of corporations, the railway barons, the banking barons, they are all yoked with political elites, right? Whether you are Democrat, Republican, or in China now, you're close to Xi Jinping or not close, all right? Or you fall out like Alibaba, all right, because you made a remark against the bureaucrats. There's no escaping the proximity of businesses, large businesses that have been successful with political elite. How that is navigated, whether it becomes a victim or a victor, well, we pick our chance in life, right? While we remain academics and comment about these things, Alex, right? I was on the phone with someone who part of the Phileo group on the Phileo land side. I say, well, at least you exited with lots of money. Well, some of us thought we could exit with some money, but I had to go back to practice. No, I'm not speaking out of envy. I was just having a self-parody about it. And then he said, well, I promptly lost it all recently. So how? I said, well, at least you enjoyed it for a while. Okay. Anyway, that's just a little passing comment. Any other comment? Tenhua, would you like to say something? I think you were in the thick of action at the demise of it. You were one of the really passionate ones who gave your all, you know, Tenhua. I had a lot of respect for you. Would you like to make any
thanks, Philip, for your very kind words. I was it's not bravery, or it could be cowardice that made me sort of stay right almost to the end.
Or foolhardiness.
Could be that too. Yeah, I did stay right till the end until the bank was sold to Maybank. And promptly, as soon as the sale was done, Mr. Chui Mansau was the counsel who helped Phileo on the Phileo side of things. As soon as the sale was done, Mr. Chui said, what are you going to do now, Tay? I said, I don't know. I just know that I don't want to be with Maybank. So I'm going to leave the industry. Well, Mr. Chui graciously said, why don't you come over? So I joined Chui after that. But the end days of Phileo brought into focus the ugliest side of Malaysian business politics association. It really brought it into focus. And not just financially, but, you know, people had different sorts of adverse consequences trained on them. I'm here in Melbourne now, partly because of that reason. You know, it was not a good experience. You know, the interplay between politics and business can result in very high cost. And I say it not just to businesses, but personally as well.
Thank you for that, Denhua. I'm aware after living through Malaysia 40 years in these things, the destruction of entities, even co-op crisis. Yes, there are valid co-op that need to be taken up, but there were thriving cooperatives which were destroyed, and livelihood were destroyed because of political calculus. These issues are pervasive, not only in Malaysia, as Dr. Alexander said, in Indonesia. All right, that's part of the game. All right, maybe there's no other game in town. My good partner made a very interesting remark. A guy played poker in a place and the deck is stacked against him. So after a while, he lost so many rounds, he walked out very disappointed. And someone came to him and said, hey, you know, the game is stacked against you, don't play, you know. Then 2 days later, he comes back and said, I told you not to come and play, you know. He said, well, there's no other game in town, right? This is a game and I want to play, all right? The analogy may not be fully opposite. I don't play poker, but there you are. I mean, the game in town is this game. And entrepreneurs will find a way to do it. And the destruction to personal lives and disruption. Thank you, Tenhua, for a very poignant comment. We don't need to go into details, but there you are. Any other questions? Come on. I'll be happy to take on.
We have one question, Philip, from one of our students at Monash University. So let's see what our younger generations are asking. So Kang is asking, hi Philip, I'm aspiring Monash student. If Phileo was set up in this decade, perhaps it could be set up under a different structure like fintech and morphed into a unicorn and use Singapore or Indonesia as its headquarters instead. So would this be a possible observation?
I am not a fintech person, actually. Mr. Kong, I know you are probably still in the game or somehow. Maybe you can answer that. Actually, Tong actually mentioned that if you are given a chance to do this again, will you? He said there's a timing in life and there's a different way of looking at things. But fintech, yes, it is a very, very important area. I am aware of a bit of a terrain. But Kong, would you like to make an observation as an older player and now observing the younger players? Would you have any advice on to this question?
Let me try to answer that question. By the way, I'm more of a technology person, not a legal person, per se. So from a technological perspective, it's generally more the same. Phileo then was maybe first in the market. Today, the technology is kind of mature, per se, leading to various issuance of digital licenses, digital banking licenses in various countries in Malaysia. So yes, we could possibly then set up under the new digital banking license today, but the banking play is still very much the same. It's still a bank, it's still governed by the various regulations and so on. And it's not really a fintech per se. So therefore the question is, what is a fintech? Generally, fintech is about scale, using technology to scale. And scale can only be achieved on a global basis or at least on a regional basis, per se. Banking is still very much a domestic scope because it's governed by local regulations, per se. So I wouldn't really think that we could use a fintech model to replicate the Phileo model, per se. So we got to think of a different model that can achieve scale regionally, at least, and then subsequently globally. That would be the fintech model.
Interesting.
Thank you.
The question, Dr. Adnan, is counsel. I don't think the person is saying legal alone, but Kong's comment is very valuable. You wanted to say something before I jump in.
No, I just thought it would be perhaps we can invite Kong in the future to talk about fintech. I'm sure so many of our young students, it's all about fintech these days. Fintech has become kind of a synonym for finance, where it may not always be the same. I mean, so yeah, absolutely. I mean,
but I'm not really into fintech. I'm still in banking, by the
way. So I find that, as a lawyer while still practicing, and I get briefs from overseas, the technological platform has, I use the word convergence, right? We are aware of it. It converged so many industries, but the laws are still driven by industry and silos, all right? Recently, I was dealing with one where the social media is being used. An influencer will have some form of a product. I won't go into details because it's breach of confidence. And then I look at the law and say, there's whole sets of law when you are having a food product or a health product, all right? Then you go into pharmacological act, food act, a whole list of things. And then the player then says, then how can we do business in Malaysia? I said, well, I mean, you asked me as a lawyer. That's why I'm a lawyer. I'm not a businessman. But the point is, these rules are all trying to grapple with the brave new world of, these intimidated retailers, all right? Using the platform and network marketing. What does it mean to be network marketing, direct selling? I'm not talking about fintech now, right? I'm just showing that the technology has really created the brave new world of where lawyers are still coming to terms with it. And then we now throw in cryptocurrency, all right? That's another big topic which we can't talk about today, all right?
Yeah, that is absolutely, that's very interesting, Philip. And when I teach banking law to our students, and when I refer to those old cases, Joe Kimson, Foley and Hill, and I tell them that, they have established principles which are still applicable, they can't seem to really appreciate how can those 200, 300 old cases still apply, and be applicable today. So that's an interesting point, Philip.
And then Philip, we have the pressure on consumer protection, all right? Digital banking products, all right? These are questions which, as I negotiate this with my fellow academicians, right, I realize that the ministries are also not up to dealing with it. Not even the central bank, despite central bank having more resources than the other ministries, right? They are not coping with this whole tension of consumer protection also, all right? Anyway, that's an aside. Somebody was asking a question, is it? Sorry.
No, actually, I wanted to ask one question, Philip, if I may.
Of course.
Use my privilege as a chair. After having read the Phileo story and after listening to your presentation, I still don't seem to get really what was the criteria used for the merging of the banks. In fact, in the Phileo story, it was mentioned that it wasn't necessarily that the stronger banks are the ones which remain. You know, like Phileo apparently was doing better than some other banks which are still today around today. So what was the criteria, at least the one which was offered by the regulators at the time for merging?
I think the official policy was that as I use that phrase, big is better, rather than you could be I don't want to overuse that word, a boutique bank that actually can survive in the sea of large whales, all right? In fact, when there's a huge storm, the whales can be convulsed, whereas the ikan bilis may be able to nimbly navigate the stormy shores. I mean, if you read sociological stuff, you can see that happens continually. The too large to fail comment is actually too easily justified. Then, while again you were there, I mean, were you aware of the real, or at least the public reason, the consolidation? Do you remember that at all, Tianhua? I wasn't really involved in that anymore. Yeah.
It's a long way back now, trying to recall what were the criteria. But I think one of it, which from memory, is just to square away balance sheets and losses. I think at that time a lot of banks have copped a lot of losses. There were holes in the provisions and that affected balance sheets a lot. And I think one of the drivers was to boost balance sheets of those 10 groups as much as possible. That was certainly one of the criteria, but although I'm not sure the extent to which that was the driving force, but that was one of the things that was bandied about at that time, I think.
Interesting point, yeah. The non-performing loans in large banks too, they need to be kind of fill up a bit. So if you have a good bank and it's a good asset, all right, you merge the thing and you consolidate the accounts, then the black hole, we call it, may be covered up, all right? And life moves on beyond the borrowers who are now living happily ever after outside the jurisdiction of the law, all right? The remarkable thing, and here I do want to pay tribute to the founder, he did not exit the country. He sat down and he dealt with the matter. Regardless of what people say about the founder, he did not. There were many who exit very quickly during the period and they drove it from overseas. He did stay behind and worked it all out. He did not exit. And beyond that, he also, now it is part of our history, he created the media group called The Age. Again, for better or for worse, even not his supporter, I don't think he will mind me quoting him, Professor Jomo, who is not exactly a supporter of capitalists, he's a left of center economist, did say that the media age was to be complimented for taking a courageous stand in the 1MDB saga, right? Which is still playing out its drama in our lives. How closely yoked we are in this drama is something to behold, actually. Yeah.
Thank you, Philip. Actually, we have exhausted our time, but if we have one more question, perhaps I can take one last question if there are any.
Or comments, yeah. It's okay. I think we can spend another 5 minutes if those who want to. Thank you for all of you attending. Any other comments? Any questions? Liang Hua, would you like to say something? You were part of the whole drama. Are you there? Or has he left? No. She'd rather not say anything. Huh? Michael, would you like to say something? You were part of the insider, peripheral, and all that. Yeah. Michael would like to keep a distinguished silence. Any other comments? If not, I mean, I apologize if my presentation is more partly anecdotal, but within it, academics in the field could unpack quite interesting things, all right? And beyond that, issues of bank governance, yoked to regulatory bodies, bigger questions. Should we have a master regulator in Malaysia? I don't think it will happen in my lifetime, because all ministries like to have their territory and the turf. The Ministry of Domestic Trade would like to keep Corporate Commission Malaysia, the core fiduciary duty entity for company law. Negara would want to keep their regulatory power, although they should focus on monetary policy with no disrespect. They are also using the Financial Services Act, which replaced Mafia, a very interesting act. And then you have Securities Commission, all right? And we all know that the recent issues in Saga that is confronting the capital market, how various groups are impacted when there is a failure. The banking system is impaired, large sums can be borrowed, the capital market, stock market can be impaired, and Corporate Commission is still doing their investigation. I don't want to name the entity, it's ongoing, and we know what we're talking about, all right? These issues are pretty pervasive and perennial. I'm not sure a master regulator is a complete answer either. I don't have all the answers in this. There are large debates in the academic field about merging regulators. This is not a place to discuss this. I see a very robust question by my good friend Cheryl.
Right.
Are our banks too large to fail, did it? Sorry, Adnan, you can read the question out.
Yes, so Cheryl is asking, are our banks now too big to fail? Meaning, is the government exposed to a high risk of bailouts if we have another major banking crisis?
I think nothing is too large to fail, isn't it? Huh? Lehman Brothers was quite large during the Enron crisis. AIA became too large to fail because they couldn't quite figure out what did AIA commit in the derivatives. Lehman was allowed to fail, not that large, no doubt, Lehman. You have Merrill Lynch was large, but he failed. LTCM was very large with Nobel Prize laureate, but it's not a bank, okay, to be fair. Cheryl's point, bailouts, moral hazards, these are, again, perennial issues in our financial landscape. I think our schools of education must study these so that when professionals who graduates in our hands, we are responsible as law teachers in this area to at least alert them that this is going to happen. And Cheryl point, will there be bailouts? Yes, there will be. There will, whether the bank will be bailout or the entity will be bailout, we all know that Petronas seems to be the piggy bank now, right? And there is a huge issue. This is a larger comment about the curse of having all also, right? Or the blessing, right? It depends on how you look at it. All can be a blessing and a curse. So you have these issues which are all part of our political economy landscape. A large questions that you pose, Cheryl, I don't think we can answer it, but I would imagine that if Maybank suffers a huge thing, it will be bailout because you can't allow Maybank to fail, all right? But there you are, all right? When is it too large to fail? When is it that you are young and you are resilient and you are lithe and you are strong and you can be taken up? These are interesting questions to reflect on.
Right. Okay, so any other questions? I can see that Philip is very gracious, so he is happy to answer your questions. Though as a host, I'm trying to make sure that I know everyone else may have as well some other commitments. So any last questions? Okay, if not, I suppose, Philip, we can bring this talk to an end. So I would like to express my gratitude and thank to Philip Koh. Philip, this was a wonderful session, really, because we have our students in attendance. We also have our colleagues, practitioners, and in the past, such talks like this were normally only held internally for our students, and we are now sort of opening these talks to our to public, to our colleagues, and I think this is it's a wonderful thing to see everyone really coming and listening to these. I would once again I would like to thank everyone else who really attended the talk today, who is in the attendance with us. This is only the beginning. We will be having many more talks like this in the future. If you would like to know where you can find the links to these talks, you can visit our School of Business, Monash University, Malaysia Facebook page, or the LinkedIn page where our brochures and details will be uploaded to. With this, thank you all so much for listening, for being with us today, and we hope to see you again in the future.
And a last closing remark from me. Thank you, Dr. Adnan, for ably moderating. Thank you all my former colleagues and friends from Phileo, joining us from overseas even, like Tenhua and others who are having your own commitments. My sharing is a bit of down memory lane with bittersweet memories, and yet with hindsight, there are much to learn from these lessons. And I think the only problem is the great philosopher. One thing we learn from history is we never learn, all right? That's a very despairing thought, but we continue. Like Sisyphus, we will roll the rock up the hill. If it goes down again, we will go back down. We'll roll it again and again and again. I thank the School of Business and Taxation of Monash for affording me this platform. I thank all the illustrious guests. I do not wish to name all of you all, but I appreciate your time, and I deeply value that academics should engage with the marketplace of ideas and be allowed to be challenged or be differed with. With those words, I thank everyone and have a great day. And those who are fasting, Selamat Ramadan, and in this holy month where we reflect about all things that are good and beautiful.
Well said. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone.